So, first of all, morning, welcome, and really good for people to introduce themselves. So, in no particular order, Stuart, if you could just introduce yourself first of all, please.
Hello, I'm Stuart Brocklehurst. I run a procurement technology business called Applegate based in North Devon.
Brilliant. Thanks, Stuart. Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily Hill, co-founder and CEO of Ghyston, which is a bespoke software house based in Bristol.
Brilliant. Thank you, Emily. And Fabrizio.
Hello, I'm Fabrizio Costa. I'm a lecturer at Exeter University in data science.
Brilliant. Thank you. So welcome everyone. So this first session, collaboration in action, how machine learning is enabling SupplyDevon. So there's a few kind of descriptive words in there in terms of, machine learning is a scary topic for some, but actually a key thing when you talk about technology and innovation. But before we come to that, I think let's start with you, Stuart, and kind of set the scene in terms of what is this all about in terms of the SupplyDevon project? Where did it come from, and what's it all about?
Thank you. So last summer, the government set up something called the Sustainable Innovation Fund, and seeing that obviously the pandemic is primarily a health crisis, but an economic crisis follows on. And specifically, data shows that here in the Southwest, we're likely to be the worst affected part of the UK in economic terms. So the Sustainable Innovation Fund was a £200 million initiative looking at projects which could help drive economic recovery, but also tackle climate change, and also respond to Black Lives Matter and find ways to tackle discrimination. So quite a tough set of requirements. So earlier on, at the very start of the pandemic, we had set up a non-commercial service, a COVID supply hub, which was incredibly successful in getting supplies like PPE to where they were needed. Thinking on that, we had a chat with Ghyston and with Exeter University, and we realised there was a possibility to build on that to set up a regional supply hub, essentially to help organisations such as councils, universities, corporates, to buy from suppliers in their locality, a notion which is sometimes called community wealth building. So to support local suppliers, also to reduce the impact of climate change, and in ways which we'll turn to affect discrimination as well. So quite a straightforward service, really, which matches local suppliers to the need, and provides some things like supplier onboarding details to make it easier for purchasers to work with smaller businesses as well.
Okay, that makes sense. Simon has just put in the chat, interesting statement. Why would the Southwest be the worst affected region economically by the pandemic?
That is probably a whole separate session sometime. Partly it's the significance of hospitality and tourism down here. There are more reasons as well, but that is part of it. There's a report by the Institute for Fiscal Studies, which is public domain, called the Green Budget, and there's data in there if that's something someone would like to look into further.
Right, okay, brilliant. And people do put comments, questions, interesting bits and pieces in the chat as well, and people, you can also you can use the people tab on the right side if you want to message people individually and see who else is in the session, people can connect with and what have you. So one final piece for you, Stuart, before I move on. What is the problem then that SupplyDevon is actually solving? So
really three things. Firstly, if you try to address the economic challenges in the Southwest by pumping government money into projects, most of the time that money is pumped straight out again to suppliers based elsewhere. And it can be really difficult to engage with suppliers. We have an SME-based economy, and large organisations are not well set up to find those SMEs. So firstly, it's addressing that economic challenge, and it's getting the matching of the right suppliers to the need, and that's where the machine learning comes in. Secondly, is the environmental issue, and it's starting on a journey of improving procurement, partly by reducing unnecessary journey of goods and people, where things get shipped in from Newcastle to Exeter when they could have come from Torbay, for example. And so it reduces the carbon emissions from that, and it measures the saving there as well. Thirdly, the ethical aspect. The original intent was to prevent the machine from learning bad habits. Artificial intelligence learns from humans. It can learn racism, for example. I have to say, Fabrizio has dramatically exceeded our expectations here, because actually what Fabrizio and colleagues have produced goes way beyond that. It will also adjust a short list of suppliers to ensure that it is representative of the diversity in the supply base. So if it is not matching the ethnic or gender diversity of that sector, it will add suppliers to rebalance that, which is brilliant. And Fabrizio also came up with the idea that this could also be used, the same functionality, to ensure a representation of SMEs or startups, which is something I'm starting to talk to government about, because that sounds like a great idea for government purchasing, to give that opportunity out. And I should say huge kudos to Emily, to Fabrizio, and to their teams. It's been a brilliant project to work on. It goes live incidentally in a couple of weeks' time, and it's really exceeded my expectations in what's been delivered. Okay.
Thank you, Stuart. So I'm going to turn to Emily next. I'm going to head all the way up to Bristol next, before we then come to Fabrizio and start to get into some of the detail around the machine learning and what that has enabled in this. So Emily, it sounds like it's a really, really strong collaboration. What value, in terms of you as an outside organisation, Ghyston coming in, Ghyston software, what value do you bring to a sort of, a complex project like this?
Well, I think there is high level complexity on the project, and internal teams, technical teams, tend not to come across that often, because their primary goal is to keep the lights on, keep the systems maintained, sort of business as usual. Whereas external agencies like ours, that's our day-to-day, is to get involved in complex projects. So we bring sort of wealth of experience of those kind of projects into the organisation. And I think also we've encountered projects in many different industries, many different business problems. So there's a certain level of cross-pollination of ideas. So, for example, we've encountered solutions in service sectors that we can then bring into manufacturing, and vice versa. I think the other thing I'd say is that we're agnostic. We've seen many different technologies used in the wild. So when there's a choice of techs, we can make good recommendations of the right tech use, the right approaches. What a lot of it boils down to is we've seen a lot of mistakes made by other companies, so we can kind of like head them off at the pass and help clients avoid.
And in terms of a project that was, that emerged out of the response to the pandemic, and then got off the ground and secured funding and the relevant partners, the University of Exeter, in terms of challenges in this particular time, or actually not really, because the tech is there to enable you to collaborate and work and brainstorm and have clear projects. How did it play out differently to projects perhaps pre-pandemic, or was that another factor?
Not really. I mean, I think it was very similar. We've worked with Applegate before, and collaborated in a very similar way on this project. So the tech is ready to do that. Which
actually encourages, in terms of collaborations, actually there are fewer barriers, actually, in terms of if you know how to use the tech. Okay, so Fabrizio, machine learning. I'm a bit scared. Should we?
Don't be.
No. So I think, first of all, describe, I know this is a really hard question, but could you just sort of, before we dive into the detail of this project, tell me a little bit about machine learning, which is probably the silliest question I've ever asked on a Thursday morning. But just we've got a diverse audience, which is fantastic. Many of them will be like, God damn, what a silly question, of course we know. But let's start with that, and then let's move on from that point.
Right. Okay. So you can think about machine learning as a sort of way to automate something that happened in the past, hoping that the same kind of things will happen in the current time and in the future. So if you have processes for which you are collecting lots of data, and you have some outcomes that is associated to what you did in this process, then you can have machines learn these associations, and so have predictions about if I keep on doing certain things, what would be the outcome there. Now, this can be very useful because you can have companies that would like to, for example, do some quality processing, so monitoring. So you might want to say, okay, flag me some suspiciously low quality predicted outcome so that I can spend more time there, allocate resources, human resources, to look into the case. But if you have other cases where the machine says that's going to be fine, move on. So this allows you to acquire efficiencies and being able to scale sometimes orders of magnitude.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then Stuart, on this project, referred to actually using machine learning to address the issue of diversity. I mean, how do you do that?
Shall I answer or Stuart?
Yeah, to Fabrizio, to you. Yeah.
Yes,
please.
Sure. So the most important part was that machines, of course, they really need to be told very specifically what they have to look for and how they have to do things. So the most important thing was to define and measure what we meant by fairness. So we really have to come up with a detailed definition that says, look, I want to check ethnicity. All right. So we have to put in place processes which are programs that would be able to quantify, identify, categorize, and say, okay, so I can look at these things and I can tell you this has this ethnicity, this is this other ethnicity. And on top of that, then you can monitor what, for example, in this case, what we want to have is supplier lists which are balanced on lots of different protected categories. So the first thing, monitor and measure what's the actual level for every proposed list. Are we doing as we should? And if not, what can we do? And so there we came up with a system that would prioritize and allow you to surface those suppliers that would match the notion of protected category, so that initially the team could select them and eventually the machine can select them to balance this list.
And then, of course, I suppose once it goes live, you're then going to start getting some new data coming in terms of how people are using it, what choices are being made, what selections are being put forward, and so the learning goes on and on.
Yes, so the difference between the traditional, let's say, algorithmic or software engineering solutions to problems and the new machine learning-based approach is in this aspect of prior you had to write down every single nuance and aspect that you wanted to tackle. Now we can have this learning procedure. So you have to be very careful about the examples that you are feeding your learning system, because he's going to learn from past experiences. If those are bad, he will learn bad things. So that's important, why we need to monitor. So we have ways to monitor what's happening so that we know what we have to act on.
Okay, I get it. Thank you, Fabrizio. It'd be really interesting to hear from people in the chat whether anyone is working on projects or uses machine learning as an aspect of AI within their business right now. Because I wanted to turn to Stuart and we're going off script a bit, but the potential here is huge. We're only at the start of it, I guess. Some of these things. Are companies, in terms of AI and machine learning, do they get it? Are we doing enough? We've got the likes of University of Exeter on our doorstep and others across the region. It sounds like this could be the start of something that's applicable in so many areas.
I think you make a very good point, Dan. At Exeter, we have the Institute of Data Science and Artificial Intelligence, which is a branch of the Turing, which is the UK's National Institute in AI. So we're immensely fortunate to have some of the country's sort of leading figures in AI right here in Devon. So I'd certainly encourage companies to look at what can be done and look at partnering with the universities we have in the Southwest. I think it's worth saying, if I take the example here in procurement, it is a problem which is very well suited to a machine learning outcome, because you essentially you're identifying a number of suppliers who would be invited to bid on a request for quotation. And you can then see which of the suppliers respond, which do not, who is awarded the contract. And as you see that over thousands of transactions, the machine can identify the patterns, because it gets the feedback loop. And I think this is critical, that it can see the outcome of the request for quotation, and therefore it can look for the patterns. What is it that in a particular category of goods or services is making a supplier the right supplier. So it's not a question, I think, that absolutely any business problem is suited to machine learning, but that's an example of the type which is. I think machine learning, data science, these are technologies which are accessible and relevant now. So we have things like quantum computing, which lie perhaps a bit further over the horizon, and we'd be quite tough to be commercializing the benefits of that right now. But this is something which is absolutely applicable, and so I definitely would encourage businesses thinking about it, engage with a university, take some time to look at whether there is something which is suitable, and these partnerships can be so enriching, I think, on all sides.
Thank you, Stuart. And Emily, I guess this. It's clearly quite a complex project. How do you kind of, the software company, the procurement experts, the machine learning piece, to summarize it from the university, how do you keep track of all of that and that collaboration approach? Is there kind of a clear methodology around that? Have there been learnings along the way?
I think you need to make sure there's commonly understood goals and objectives. All the organisations sign up to, and that they're kept front and centre in the project. And there's interdependency, making those clearly visible. I think that all projects should be expected to change, and in collaborative projects, there's an extra element, because if one party learns, it might affect another party. So there's knock-on effects. And in this particular instance, working in the domain of AI means there's even a higher level of uncertainty than normal. So we have to not avoiding change, but managing it and adapting to it effectively. So that's why, as it's really important to be tracking everything really carefully, and scopes, risks, issues, and that would be agile methodology and processes that we use on all our projects. So kind of you have to be really competent in those.
Yeah, sounds pretty agile, but clear objectives and close working, of course. It's lovely to have, Bristol, University of Exeter, and North Devon, leading tech company, in terms of this lovely ecosystem that we're building and across the region. It's rather exciting. So Fabrizio, how does it work then, in terms of what makes a business issue a good candidate for machine learning? Have you got a list on the wall there, or is it a bit more complex than that?
Well, so the idea is, do you have processes for which you can collect data on how the process is being managed? Is this data that you're collecting sufficient? So would a person that you hire, just the day before, looking at the data that you've collected on this process, would he be able to make the right decision? If that a person that you just hire, you explain the thing one day, and he gets it with the data that you provide, then a machine probably can do it, okay? If it requires a lot of undocumented expertise and knowledge, that's going to be much, much harder, okay? So if you have processes for which you have data, such that you can explain it to a novice very quickly, and you can do it, then you can do it at scale. Then you can assume that the machine will replace 1, 10, 100, 1,000 such interns instantly, and so then you can leverage that.
Okay, and if so there are people in the session today saying, okay, I've thought of something. Do you just ring up the university? What's the kind of the process to engage with the University of Exeter and others? Are you looking for collaborations? Are you looking to work with businesses? And if so, what is that the next step that companies can take?
Absolutely. So there's different levels or tiers of collaboration. At the simplest and easiest, we graduate cohorts of hundreds of students, and these students, they have to every year work on a project, on a final year project. So that's 6 months of hard work on a specific data science or machine learning project. Now, we very much welcome real problems from companies. So if a company can come up with a very tightly well-defined problem for which it would need expertise in data science and machine learning, that could be, one occasion to dip your toes, no commitment. You just provide the data, provide the problem, and the student will try and work on it. It will be supervised by staff members, by academics.
Brilliant.
So that's a possibility. This happens generally around November. So if you have something, November is the date to. We are providing forms where the companies can fill them, and then we'll submit it to the students, and the students will work on it from January to the summer.
Okay.
And then there are other forms of collaborations which are more structured. So these KTP, these knowledge transfer programs, or entire co-founding of PhDs, where we would work on a specific problem for a company for 2-3 years. And so that this is also possible.
Brilliant. Well, I think it's really, really useful. So I think, that meshing between, the academic in terms of, that cutting edge technology and people and potential and our tech firms. And this is not just the domain of the big tech companies. This is actually something that, we need to be looking at all the different levels. By the sounds of it. I can't see Emily at the moment, so I'm not sure if Emily's still there or not. But I'm going to come to you, Stuart, in terms of, in terms of what next for this project. And it goes live in a couple of weeks, and then people will start to be using it, and you'll be obviously engaging with people to push them to do that. I suppose it'd be good to sort of, what is the 2021 plan in terms of SupplyDevon?
So I'll turn to that in just a second. I think I'd also mention Joe has put in the chat the link for companies who want to engage with Exeter University. So in terms of what actually is the way and how do you start the conversation, that's the link. And there'll be others for other universities. I feel sort of like BBC World, we should probably say other universities are available to Bath and Bristol, UWE and Plymouth and Falmouth and so forth. Also worth mentioning, if you are based in Devon, I'm afraid this is only if you're based in Devon and you're an SME, then you can use something called the Impact Lab. If you Google Exeter Impact Lab, there is funding, government funding, for completely free projects paid for by public money for Devon-based SMEs to work with academics in this area. And that's another way to do a small project to start.
And just to add to that, our next session, we have Bristol Set Squared, Falmouth Launchpad, and Future Space Bristol as well. So we are truly pan-regional, if that is the right word, don't worry. And there are also some amazing initiatives and projects that are going on that we'll hear about coming up in a few minutes. So thank you, Stuart. So SupplyDevon 2021 in a nutshell.
We go live in a couple of weeks' time, and if anyone is on here who is a Devon-based supplier, please do register. There's a holding website, the address is in the chat, where you can register to be ready. We are working with the sort of big procurers in the area on their usage of it. So it goes live, and hopefully we start to see increasing business going to smaller companies here. We're also talking to some other councils in the Southwest who are interested in doing their own version, and it's been built in a way that you can run different versions of it for different geographies. Something though that's really interesting that's come out of this is procurement is a big source of carbon emissions. I know one big institution in the area has estimated 50% of their carbon emissions comes from their procurement, but it's very hard to measure accurately, and it's even harder to do something about it. And we've realized that there is actually a potential that we would both be able, between the university and ourselves, with the data we have, to provide a detailed assessment of the procurement carbon footprint of organizations, but also help them do something about it by having responses to tenders, which, as well as the price quote and other information, actually has the carbon emissions of different options before you, so you can make an informed choice whether you make the trade-off or whether you are going for a lower carbon emission route, even perhaps if it's slightly more expensive.
And by building that into the procurement process, that makes it so real, doesn't it? And part of that decision making, that's really exciting, isn't it? Thank you, Stuart. So Emily, coming to you, go live in 2 weeks. fingers crossed, and I'm sure that's always the bit with the software companies and the partners. And that sounds really exciting. I think, is there a learning point from you in terms of this? In terms of collaborations as well, in terms of how we should be working as a region and with our institutions and our tech companies. Is that something that you feel is an important piece to this?
Yeah, can you hear me okay, Dan?
Yeah, all good, yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
I mean, I think really with collaboration, it's essentially about communication. So it's really important to work as one team, make sure roles and responsibilities are really clear, try, if possible, to sort of integrate sub-teams across the different organizations. And I think just using all the tools that are available, so from online messaging, video conferencing, which we're all using now, of course, to more technical things like design workshops, code reviews, retrospectives that are across the different organizations. So I think that's really the key to making a successful project. Brilliant.
Thank you, Emily. And just to pick out a couple of points from the chat, so thank you, everyone. So Toby Parkin, as Chair of Tech Southwest, is talking about some proof of concepts using machine learning that they've done. Andrew Neal, edge computing, intelligence, etc. And Paul Coles, BT, investing a lot in this area. So yeah, I mean, I would encourage people to, find out more, reach out and connect with those on the call. We are kind of a supportive community in the Southwest, and check out University of Exeter and others, and of course SupplyDevon as well. In a couple of weeks' time, it's going to be really interesting to see the journey that it goes on in the coming weeks and months. And it's the hard work, then it starts, and then it's some more fantastic learning. So it sounds like a really fantastic project, really great collaboration, and it's a really lovely way to start Tech Southwest, the tech gatherings in terms of 2021, with a lovely positive project that was born out of 2020 and is going to do real good and real learning and support the economy, and having those different layers in terms of diversity and sustainability. It kind of broadens it out in terms of, okay, is it just a procurement project? Absolutely not. It's a complex piece. It's really thought out, and it's going to I guess have some really interesting learnings through how people engage with it and as it goes on. So that's really exciting. So thank you, Fabrizio. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Stuart. Thanks so much for being part of our first session. To explain what happens next, we will gracefully depart this session, and including the audience as well. And then we're going to click on the sessions on the left-hand side and head into session 2, where we've got another exciting lineup to talk about another aspect of tech in the Southwest. And I think that comes complete with a poll as well. So yes, it's going to be live voting. Can you believe that on Thursday morning in January? I know it doesn't get much more exciting than that. So thanks everyone. We'll see everyone in session number 2 for more conversation and chat. And thanks so much again from my guests for session number 1. Brilliant. And SupplyDevon. Thanks everyone.
Thanks, Dan.
Bye now.